Welcome to English Journey with Story. This channel is not only about learning English, it is also about learning how to live a better life. Through simple stories, we learn about love, family, mistakes, courage, forgiveness, and the choices we make every day. Today's story is about a woman who stayed away from her family for 8 years. She thought silence would protect her. She thought leaving was the only way to find peace. But one morning, she received 61 phone messages from her family. Her grandfather had died. And one of those messages mentioned a name that her family had refused to say for 8 years. She did not know why her family suddenly needed her. She did not know what her grandfather had left for her. And most importantly, she did not know that one visit to her old family home would change everything. This is the story of a woman who learned that silence can protect us for a while, but sometimes the truth must be spoken. Part 1. The 61 Messages. She was 34 years old and worked at a hospice center. Her job was not easy. She spent many nights beside sick and dying people. She listened to families cry. She held old hands when people were afraid. She learned that life could change in only a few minutes. Because of her job, she had become calm in difficult situations. But there was one thing she did not want to face: her family. For 8 years, she had stayed away from them. She had changed her phone number. She had moved to another city. She had stopped visiting her hometown. She had stopped answering family calls. She did not do it because she hated them. She did it because she needed to survive. One morning, after finishing a long night at work, she returned to her small apartment. She was tired. She still wore her work clothes. She placed her bag on the floor and sat beside the window. Then she looked at her phone. There were 61 missed messages. She stared at the screen. For 8 years, nobody in her family had called her. Not on her birthday. Not during holidays. Not even when she moved to another city. So why were they calling now? She opened the first message. It was from her mother. Her grandfather had died. She listened to the second message. Her mother was crying. The third message gave information about the funeral. The fourth message mentioned paperwork. Then the messages continued. Her sister called. Her brother called again. Another family member called. Someone called but said nothing. Someone left only the sound of a television. Someone called in the middle of the night and hung up. The more messages she heard, the more worried she became. This was not normal grief. Something else was happening. She began writing down the time of every message. It was a habit from her work. When something was difficult to understand, she wrote down the facts. Soon she noticed something strange. Her family was not only talking about her grandfather. They were talking about her. They were talking about what she might do. They were talking about what she might sign. They were already making plans before she had even returned home. Then she heard one message that made her stop. Her mother mentioned that she should remember what happened the last time. That sentence brought back an old memory. 8 years earlier, a 15-year-old girl in the family had arrived at a hospital with an injured wrist. The young woman had seen the injury. She had become worried. She believed the girl might be in danger. So she made a report. She believed she was doing the right thing. But her family did not see it that way. They said she had misunderstood. They said she had created problems. They said she was unstable. The report was never proven. Her career was damaged. She lost her job. She spent a large amount of money on legal help. She felt completely alone. After that, she left. She changed her number. She moved away, and she never looked back. At least, that was what she told herself. Then came message number 49. It was very short. Her sister mentioned a name that nobody in the family had spoken for 8 years. The young woman's heart stopped for a moment. That name belonged to the girl from the past, the girl whose injury had changed everything, the girl her family had tried to forget. The woman sat silently on her kitchen floor. She suddenly understood something. Her grandfather's death was not the only reason her family was calling. There was another problem, and somehow she was part of it. The final message was from a lawyer. The lawyer said that her grandfather had left a will, and there was something very important inside it. He had chosen her to take care of his estate. She had not spoken to him for 8 years, yet he had remembered her. She drove back to her hometown. She did not know what she would find there. She only knew one thing, whatever her family had been hiding. She was about to discover it. Part 2. The Grandfather's Secret. Her hometown was small. There were only a few streets, a small hospital, some shops, a courthouse, and the family home. She had not changed much, but she had. She was no longer the frightened young woman who had left 8 years earlier. She was older now. She had a job. She had built a quiet life. Still, when she saw her grandfather's house, old feelings returned. Her mother was waiting outside. There was no hug. There were no warm words. Her mother simply looked at her and began talking about the funeral. The woman entered the house. The smell brought back many memories. Her grandfather had spent most of his life working with locks and keys. He was a quiet man. He did not talk much, but he noticed everything. After his death, she learned that he had left the house, the shop, some savings, and a few personal things. But the most surprising part was the will. He had given her the responsibility of handling his estate. He had trusted her, even after 8 years of silence. She wondered why. The lawyer explained that her grandfather had kept her phone number. He had kept it for years. He had never given it to the rest of the family. He had simply kept it quietly. That information hurt more than she expected. Her grandfather had known where she was. He could have contacted her, but he had not forced her to return. Perhaps he understood why she had left. Perhaps he had been waiting for her to choose. Then she found something else. Inside her grandfather's old business book, there was a strange record. Every month, for many years, money had disappeared from the business. The amount was always the same, $600. There was no normal business reason for it. No customer name, no repair number, no receipt, only the same amount. Every month. For 8 years. She became curious. Why had her grandfather paid someone $600 every month? And who had received it? She looked through more pages. Then she found a phone number. There was no name beside it, only a number. Her hands became unsteady. She knew she had to call. But before she did, another surprise came. At the funeral home, she saw a 15-year-old girl. The girl looked nervous. She stayed near the door. She watched everyone carefully. The woman learned that the girl was another member of the family. Her age was exactly the same age as the girl who had been injured 8 years earlier. That fact frightened her. It felt like the past was coming back. But she remembered what had happened before. She had acted too quickly. She had seen something. She had broken a work rule to find more information. Even though she had believed the report was true, she had also made a mistake. She understood that now. Truth did not mean every action was correct. She did not want to make the same mistake again. So she waited. She listened. She watched. And slowly she discovered the truth. The $600 had been going to the girl from 8 years earlier. Her grandfather had been helping her every month for years. He had never told the family. He had never made a public show of it. He simply helped. The girl was now a young woman. She had built her own plan. She was trying to leave the old family situation safely. She did not want anyone to destroy that plan. The woman finally understood why her grandfather had stayed silent. He had not been silent because he did not care. He had been silent because he was trying to protect someone. But there was still another question. Why had the family suddenly become so afraid? Why did they want her to leave the estate? Why were they asking her to give up her responsibility? Then her sister finally admitted something. 8 years earlier, she had signed a statement against her. She had said that the woman often overreacted. She had helped the family prove that the woman was unstable. That statement had caused serious damage. The woman listened quietly. She was hurt, but she did not shout. She did not insult her sister. She simply understood. Her family had chosen silence over truth, and now they wanted her to do the same. But she had already spent 8 years living inside that silence. She did not want to live there anymore. Part 3. The Choice. The funeral was held on a rainy Saturday. Family members gathered at the old house afterward. There were 9 people in the kitchen. Everyone was tired. Everyone was emotional. But there was another reason for the meeting. They wanted her to give up control of her grandfather's estate. A paper was placed in front of her. If she signed it, someone else would handle everything. Her mother believed this was the best choice. It would keep the family calm. It would stop old problems from returning. It would allow everyone to move on. The woman looked at the paper. For a moment, she almost signed it. She was tired. She wanted to return to her own life. She wanted to go back to her job. She wanted to forget the town. She wanted peace. But then she looked around the kitchen. She saw the young girl standing quietly near the wall. She remembered the injured girl from 8 years earlier. She remembered how everyone had stayed silent. She remembered how silence had destroyed her own life. And she realized something. Peace was not always the same as doing the right thing. Sometimes peace was only fear wearing a different face. She signed the paper. Everyone believed she had surrendered, but she had another plan. She had signed the paper because she did not need the house or the money. She did not want control. She wanted the truth. After signing, she began to speak about the past. She admitted her own mistake. She admitted that she had broken a rule years earlier. She did not hide it. She did not make herself look perfect. She accepted responsibility. But she also refused to accept a lie. She explained what she had seen. She explained why she had reported it. She explained what happened afterward. Then she made the most important choice of her life. She contacted the proper authorities again. This time, she did everything correctly. She did not secretly open records. She did not make guesses. She did not accuse anyone without evidence. She simply reported what she had been told directly. The room became silent. Her family became angry. Some people left. Some cried. Some blamed her. But she stayed calm. Then something unexpected happened. The young woman from 8 years earlier entered the room. She had been listening. She finally decided to speak for herself. For years, other people had spoken for her. Her family, the adults, the people who believed they knew what was best. But now she was old enough to make her own decision. She gave her own statement. The woman did not try to control her. She simply stayed beside her. For the first time, the truth did not belong to one person. It belonged to the people who had lived it. After that day, the family changed. Not because everyone suddenly became good. Not because everyone apologized. Real life does not work that way. Some people stayed angry. Some relationships ended. Some people never called again. But one important thing changed. The silence was broken. The young woman was finally able to make plans for her future. She moved to another city. She continued working. She began building a safer life. The teenage girl also found a safer place to stay. The family situation slowly changed. There was no perfect ending. There was no magical solution. But there was movement, and sometimes movement is the first sign of hope. Part 4. What she finally learned. 6 weeks later, the woman received 2 letters. The first letter was from the professional board. Her old case had been reviewed. There was no new punishment. She had followed the correct process this time. The second letter came from her workplace. She was allowed to return to her night job. She stood in the lobby of her apartment building and read both letters. She did not celebrate. She did not call her family. She simply went upstairs. She sat beside her window, and for the first time in many years, she felt free. Her grandfather's estate was later completed. The house was handled properly. The money was divided according to the will. The family did not suddenly become close again. Her mother did not call. Her sister did not become her best friend. The hometown did not change, but some people did. The young woman continued building her own life. The teenage girl moved to a safer place for school. They both had difficult roads ahead. But now they had choices. The woman also changed. She kept her grandfather's old toolbox. It was not expensive. It was not beautiful. But it reminded her of something important. Her grandfather had helped quietly. He had not asked for praise. He had not needed everyone to know. He had simply done what he believed was right. That became one of the biggest lessons of her life. Doing the right thing does not always bring an easy life. Sometimes it costs money. Sometimes it costs relationships. Sometimes it costs comfort. But doing the wrong thing only to keep peace can cost even more. She also learned another lesson. She had believed that silence was a wall. The wall protected her from her family, but it also kept her from people who truly needed her. There was a difference between having a healthy boundary and hiding from the world. A boundary says that people cannot hurt you in the same way again. A wall says that nobody can come close. She had built a wall. Now she was learning how to build a door. She started answering her phone again. Not every call, not every person, but some. She started allowing good people into her life. She stopped trying to explain herself to people who had already decided not to understand. She also stopped trying to look perfect. She could admit her mistakes. She could still stand for what she believed was right. Both things could be true. That was perhaps the most important lesson. A person can make a mistake and still be telling the truth. A person can be hurt and still choose kindness. A person can lose a family and still build a new life. And a person can be quiet without being weak. Months later, she still received messages from the young people in her family. Sometimes they were very small messages: a picture of a dog, a school story, a funny mistake, a simple question. But every message meant something. Someone was no longer afraid to reach out. Someone was no longer living completely inside silence. And that was enough. She never forgot the morning when she saw 61 messages on her phone. At first, those messages had felt like danger. Later, she understood that they had been the beginning of change. The number 61 was no longer a symbol of fear. It became a reminder. Life can bring a person back to a place they thought they had escaped. Sometimes it happens through pain. Sometimes through death, sometimes through a single phone call. And when that moment comes, a person has to decide what kind of life they want next. She could have stayed silent. She could have signed the paper and left. She could have returned to her quiet apartment and forgotten everything. That would have been easier. But she chose to tell the truth carefully. She chose to admit her own mistake. She chose not to make decisions for other people. She chose to let the people involved speak for themselves. Most importantly, she chose courage without anger. That was her real victory. Not the house, not the money, not the will, not the apology she never received. Her real victory was becoming a person who could look at her past without allowing it to control her future. And perhaps that is something many people need to learn. Sometimes we wait for our family to understand us. Sometimes we wait for an apology. Sometimes we wait for someone to admit that they hurt us. But life may not give us those things. We cannot control what other people say. We cannot control whether they change. We cannot control whether they understand. But we can control what we do next. We can choose honesty. We can choose kindness. We can choose better boundaries. We can learn from our mistakes. And we can choose to build a better life. Her story did not end with everyone living happily together. It ended with something more realistic. People finally had a choice. The truth was finally spoken. And one woman finally understood that peace does not always mean silence. Sometimes peace begins when we finally have the courage to say what is true. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Remember, English Journey with Story is not only a place to improve your English, it is also a place where we learn about life. Today's story teaches us that mistakes do not make us bad people. Staying silent does not always bring peace. And telling the truth does not mean we have to hurt others. Sometimes the strongest person is not the person who speaks the loudest. It is the person who stays calm, accepts their mistakes, and still chooses to do what is right. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in her situation, would you stay silent to protect your peace, or would you speak the truth? Tell me your answer in the comments. And if this story taught you something about English or about life, please like this video, subscribe to English Journey with Story, and come back for the next story. Your comment may help another person who is going through a difficult time. See you in the next story.